while. Seems like almost 2 or 3 weeks. And so I don't know what all has happened. Not much creativity. The big news is that my wife and I went in thinking we were going to get the first ultrasound of a new baby. And instead, we found out we had not a baby. Abnormal baby. Pregnancy situation. Supposedly, they call it a molar birth. Molar pregnancy. And the idea of a molar pregnancy is that either two sperm form the entirety of the chromosomes in an egg, or the sperm fails to fertilize the egg and the egg goes for it itself. But either way, the chromosomes are messed up, and a placenta forms with this messed up thing, and it just starts growing out of control. And so with the pregnancy growing out of control, it's a real problem, and you got to have it removed as soon as possible. Basically, it's a placenta that's gone cancerous. I like to think of it as a Shoggoth, sort of a Lovecraftian eldritch horror out of control. But it has to be taken out before the exploding cancer growth spreads to the mom. Because one of those weird little-known facts about pregnancy is that the placenta is not actually part of the mom. The placenta is its own separate organism, okay? And so the placenta kind of exists like a leech inside the mom, feeding the baby, an in-between creature. And so this is a bad creature that had to be taken out. And, wow, weird story. Anyway, they weren't sure if it was a full or a partial molar pregnancy, and it has implications for how cancerous it is and the cause of it, if it was the father or the mother that really caused it. So they said after the procedure that they would let us know after the tests came in. So we're going in tomorrow to meet with the doctor and hopefully get the story. I expect, my prediction, they have no idea. They have no idea what it was or what happened, but whatever. The big news is that if it's not a molar pregnancy, there's less of a scare about having another baby. So that was weird and a big distraction from creative pursuits. Basically more like a cancer scare than a pregnancy scare. So now we're in a weird spot where it seems like everybody is trying to console us as if we lost a child, whereas as far as we can tell, we never had a child. It was more that we avoided cancer. So it's a bummer, but not this huge tragedy. I don't know. Anyway, so that's the news. To go overly personal, perhaps. But I don't know. I feel like you gotta talk about these things. Just jump right in, talking about tech. Oh, so I made a demo with my phone, working on the Wizard's Den. I made a demo, and I don't have my phone here in front of me somehow. But I made a demo so that when you drag on the screen, it creates a path, and the character will follow it. It's a derivative of things I've done before. I won't talk about what's coming next for your other fingers and the rotation of the phone. But there was a small amount of progress. It's also a little late. I gotta stop doing these at like 11 o'clock at night or midnight. Normally I drink a bunch of caffeine so I kind of crack out. Makes it hard to go to sleep, so not a great maneuver. What I was going to say this week, I have dreams of converting a location down the street into a giant tech shop. And I thought it would be cool if we have a tech shop. I always assume part of it might be a daycare and part of it might be a donut shop. For some reason, I always assume these will be hangers-on. And so I was daydreaming about the donut shop, as I do. And I often daydream about trying to bring in voodoo donuts and seek some sort of partnership collaboration. But we make the coolest voodoo donuts, where drones will fly donuts out to people inside the tech shop. Be cool as if when you walked in the door of this tech shop, the cameras scanned your face and built a 3D model of your head. And then this was the basis for the donuts for the next hour. And you can imagine a display shelf with lots of little shrunken heads that you can buy for $1 and eat. In theory, you might pray that somebody else gets their face scanned so that they can take over being the shrunken heads of the day. Or maybe you could sell people molds and they could take home their head and have it for themselves like a souvenir. I thought it'd be a cool, weird gimmick in a donut shop. In reality, the way donuts work is a lot of expanding dough. That's all I know. That doesn't lend itself well to 3D printed. Maybe we could make a mold and have the donut grow inside of it. I don't know, a weird, sketchy thing. Not a great tech thought, but just basically want to make shrunken heads using technology. Weird. So, moving on. So, keeping it short, I was going to talk about Bridge of Spies. And it's the Spielberg movie from last year, the Oscar nominee. And I don't know, if you, like me, saw the trailer for this, it looked like a depressing movie about being in East Berlin, and Tom Hanks was going to do some drama, but it didn't look very exciting. It was kind of weird, like, why is this up for the Oscar? What was the deal? Well, I watched the movie, and you should too, because arguably, it was very poorly advertised. I think it's actually three movies in one. Let's do three. One, two, three. Yeah, that's probably a bad move. So the first movie is really about how the Constitution applies to aliens, to non-Americans, which is something we don't talk about much. We often talk about America and what America means to Americans, but what does America mean to a Russian spy? So by the way, the reason I watched this movie, I'd watched a documentary, I think, called Citizen 4, about Edward Snowden, and right around the time I was deep in this Edward Snowden study, I noticed the trailers for Bridge of Spies, and I just couldn't help but wonder if Bridge of Spies was going to be Spielberg's very subtle commentary on the whole Snowden debacle. Something about the trailer or the notion of the story made me wonder the trial, basically, of this spy. It made me think about Snowden coming back to the States and what kind of trial he would stand and what rights he would have. And it's possible that is part of the movie, but certainly what I was thinking about in the first part of this movie, which is the trial of a spy. The second part of this movie is rad spycraft from the 50s and 60s, but 50s, I think. So you get to see these ancient cameras and cool gizmos and the start of modern drone technology, arguably, as well as cyanide silver dollars with little pins so you can kill yourself like a poison tooth in a James Bond story. Well, they actually had things like that, apparently, and they were the mighty dollar because we're America and capitalism. It's weird. But that's a cool secondary story that starts intercutting. And they come together in the end for the third and final story, which is kind of like a dystopian science fiction of the time when you look at East Berlin and the idea of building a wall down the middle of the street to separate off your crazy police state. And so basically the whole movie is incredibly relevant to modern concerns about surveillance and human rights violations and drones. You know, it's just like, wow. That movie was kind of overwhelmingly awesome and relevant. And it's all mixed with a very human theme. Tom Hanks brings the humanity. I was thinking they should have called the movie Standing Up for Everyone. Is that right? Jeez. Everyone stands up. I think it was Standing Up for What's Right for Everyone. Whatever. Not a great title. Wow. I was thinking I might go off on JFK, which is arguably my favorite movie of all time. If you have a movie, I often used to think I was going to be a filmmaker back in the early 2000s when I was going to the Rewind Festival in South Dakota. And there was often a question of what made you want to be a filmmaker? And most people would say Star Wars or some big movie. And I would definitely say JFK. Nobody really asked me, and I'm not a filmmaker, but if I were to have become a filmmaker, it would be JFK. That's the movie. Not because it made me want to make movies like JFK, but I saw JFK when I was early in college, still basically a recovering high school student. So after I saw JFK, I went home and I opened up this CD-ROM encyclopedia my dad had given to me, and I looked up the Bay of Pigs, and I looked up JFK and Harvey Oswald and everybody, and it was the first time I took an interest in history, and so that's why I love that movie. Although I'm not a historian, I was just some average guy who watches too much TV, and that movie made me want to look it up for myself. And the more I looked into JFK, I read interviews with Oliver Stone and saw that he's kind of was a born rich art brat from New York, but he went to Vietnam to get a taste of reality, as young men do, and became an interesting guy. And ultimately, when he talks about JFK, he talks about the concept of it being a counter myth. And the idea is that no one can ever know what actually happened, the whole JFK mess. But he was saying that what we accepted at the time of Lee Harvey Oswald being a sole shooter, just a dude with a gun out of nowhere, was a myth. And so he wasn't presenting his movie as a solution or here's exactly what happened. He was presenting his movie as a counter myth to get people to think for themselves. And that fascinates me about movies and the nature of what you can do with entertainment. And so anyway, I feel like that's kind of relevant to Bridge of Spies, but I can't make the connections right now because I'm tired. Moving on. I guess I could talk about TV really briefly. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is over, and it was a good finale. Should I talk about it for people that don't watch the show? Should I unplug this? Yeah. There was a weird hype built up last week, these out-of-nowhere promotions about who was going to die in the finale. I don't think the story had suggested that people have to die, but there was a vision one character had of a spaceship with some blood and a cross and fire, and she interpreted that to mean one of the people were going to die in space. And it was a weird storytelling device because you didn't see people. Maybe the floating blood implied a fresh person, but I never really believed it was an agent. And so out of nowhere they're saying, which agent is going to buy it on the season finale? It's just like, oh, that's dark. Really? Why does anybody have to buy it? And so an agent did buy it. So good for them. I don't know, it was a good death. Jumping forward 6 months and everything's crazy. And this heroine has become the same character she was at the start of the whole series. That's weird. Kind of rebooted her. But it was good enough to keep watching. And I hope they find a way to bring back Brett Dalton because I thought he was really cool. Not as cool as my original theory that Brett Dalton was going to be the Punisher. I thought they were really setting that up in the first season until they totally crushed it forever. I'd love to know if there was ever a time where they were wondering if the audience had embraced him, would he have been a rethought Punisher who came from the ranks of S.H.I.E.L.D. instead of from whichever war. Looking back, maybe not a great idea. Person of interest, whatever. Started watching Penny Dreadful. Although it's not a lot of fun, it's kind of a dry, cold experience. It's certainly been charming and gory as hell. What are we working on this week? I hope that I get camera control working. Basically, I'm developing my app further. Definitely get back into Adobe Illustrator a bit more. It seems like I have to do this now every time I switch gears from Illustrator to Maya 3D animations, to RealFlow, fluid simulations, to programming in Unity. I have to go back and check a bunch of notes and remember how to use the goddamn program. Most of that means figuring out the blob brush tool and remembering how to do lots of layers of gradients to create cool, slow, sexy effects. Wow, kind of a mush mouth tonight. And not much to say. So that's a quick entry and an experiment with this camera. And I hope it works. Catch you all next week. Boom. There.
It's almost fixed. Yes. What are you doing? It's like